mouse down here. Yep. Welcome to episode 24 of the Sisyphus complex solution, and I've actually remembered to say the episode number correctly this week. I've also managed to get me notes so I can do my old fart thing and that I don't have to look at things on a screen. So that's an advancement on last week. In terms of the question that I asked last week is in regard to what the format was going to be going forward, and because I've got this massive audience of what I believe has now gone to 43, I took a vote and decided that I'll do what I was suggesting I was going to do anyway. So I will continue with the Sisyphus complex solution as is, in terms of the first segment, which is recreating the Hoskyns Wiring Map. That's what this is all predominantly about. But rather than going on about the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, I want to go straight into presenting some solutions, because it very much occurs to me that finally I'm actually managing to see over the last week a couple of different people that actually are suggesting things that are fairly reasonable. Even just last night I heard something on Tim Pool's show. I can't remember the name of the guy that was on there, but I'll go into that a little bit later on, because he'd recommend something that is exactly what I've got lined up as part of the solution for tonight. But anyway, I'm not going to be bombarding everything in one go and saying, okay, here's what you do for the rest of your life and all that sort of nonsense. I'm also not saying that anything that I'm going to be presenting as a solution is the gospel. It's just practical recommendations that can actually be undertaken on a personal level, or at a later stage, and that when things start to develop on a wider scale. So what I will do is get straight into the Sisyphus complex solution to begin with, because as per usual when I'm doing this sort of stuff, and I think, well, surely to Christ there won't be another office that is demonstrating serious considerations in terms of showing the crony socialism and all the rest of it, and lo and behold, yes, there is. So I'm going to expose a little bit more of that again hopefully will give people in other countries a bit of insight to think, well, I might need to have a little bit of a look at what's going on in my own country. So 3 offices to get through before we move into the new solution segment. So this one is going to be incredibly quick. So you've got the Commissioner for Shale Gas. So once again, another one where there's no transparency. It's not a regulator. It's got no powers of enforcement or investigation. So it's therefore totally pointless and not really worth bothering then. So this is a department that's going to get dealt with very quickly. The one thing I will say is that anybody that doesn't understand certain pieces of terminology, shale gas means fracking. Okay, so I don't have a problem with fracking in the way that many other people do. I had some years ago, and that got involved with some local sort of pretend party that was trying to figure out what kind of political direction they were going to take, and they were all very anti-fracking, and needless to say I got kicked out because they were basically a bunch of lefty loonies, and I'm not a lefty loony. So but I'd looked into what their complaints were, and then looked into what the actual realities of this situation is, and also looking towards the advancements that were made in America. And to me it makes sense, but as much as you might need to, well, not might, you will need to have some sort of permissions in terms of whether, you know, you can go to certain locations and perform this kind of activity. In terms of undertaking it as a energy solution, I don't think it's something that you can add into a wider conversation as to whether we should be having some sort of energy independence, which I do think is a good idea, hence why I'm actually in favour of things like fracking. But I don't think it's something that government needs to get involved with to the extent that it tends to. You can have the regulation, make sure that they're not stepping out of bounds or things of this nature and that. But overall, I don't really see this as being something that the government needs to have a department based around. This would be something that I would stick in with all other forms of energy and say, right, okay, what is the actual energy mix that we can do, that we need here? How would we be energy independent? What is practical and realistic, which means basically wind goes out the window and solar goes out the window. And we start to have an actual grown-up conversation. But in terms of having an office like this is concerned, no, don't need it. So let's move into the more difficult one. Right. What a shit show this one is. Obviously you can see a comment that gives you a bit of a clue as to what I think already. In terms of being a cost to the taxpayer, apparently everything is done off their own bat, and they've got, you know, they're so generous with their time and everything like that. So there's no crony socialism involved in this one at all. Yeah, because these people are so kind and etc, etc. So you don't expect at all that this will be full of people that will be thinking, this is a good way to be able to have, my university's suddenly going to get this grant that we're after, and my company's suddenly going to get this funding award that we've been after, and so forth. No, of course, nothing like that would ever possibly take place, would it? But let's have a think about these. Are them. I thought I'd, rather than concentrate on what it is they claim they do, because quite frankly, fucking not a lot. I thought I'd go through the people that we're dealing with here that make up this council. And so this is what is going to take up the larger part of this part of the programme. Right, so obviously at the top of the list you got Patrick Vallance, everybody's hero, you know, the one that likes to lock everybody down for something that I will allude to later on, and that is going to have to end up having a separate little programme all of its own. But yes, untrustworthy, doesn't know what the hell he's doing. So, wouldn't want his opinion, and he's one of the chairs. Of course he is. Bloody lunatic. Then you've got Professor Dame Nancy Rothwell. Right, from Manchester University. This is the lunatic that tried to fence in all the students. Tried to turn a university into what looked like a bloody concentration camp just last year. So yeah, pleasant woman, you know. So the students ripped all of that down, thankfully. But yeah, just the sort of person that you need. And the other, she's also the person that, of all of these swamp creatures that you have, she's the person that's in, I think it was in 2017, she was found to be the one that had the most expenditure throughout the entire country for travel expenses, where she had close to £40,000 on travel expenses. £40,000 travel expenses. Yeah, because, you know, we need diversity of a sort, and there's going to be more around that as well. Right, so then we get into David Bishop. Well, the one part that I've picked up on with him is that he's a fellow at Darwin College, so, you know, no eugenics concerns there. Then we get Julia Black. I mean, the London School of Economics and Political Science. I mean, yeah, I mean, these are the people that you know, will literally talk to the most outrageous lefty lunatics. And then she is, of course, a Ramona. Gotta love your Ramonas, haven't you? Because they're grounded in reality, aren't they? Right. Philip Bond. Alright, Philip Bond. There is something that I'm going to be putting in for this department in terms of the registered interests. On the face of it, you wouldn't. I don't know if I particularly want to have a go at him as such, but he is listed as an advisor to Rolls-Royce, which is going to crop up again, and it does. Yeah, it's this favouritism thing and that, which I'll go into when I get to the more appropriate point. Muffy Calder. I mean, just the name alone. Here we've got basically who's somebody that is a proper full-on identity politics freak. So you know that there's an awful lot of pandering going on to this bloody Agenda 2030 and Great Reset bullshit. David Cannadine. He's an historian, but obviously doesn't shout out too much within these sorts of groups as what actual history is, rather than the constant changing of history that they seem to want to be undertaking these days. Because, you know, there's no 1984 about that, is there? Right. Saranga, oh, Gordon Bennett. Saranga Chandratilake. I don't actually have an issue in terms of the fact that this is a guy that works at Balderton Capital, because I do think that there is a very strong place for private equity, but I don't believe in this kind of favouritism that's going to be then allocated to these very people. And the one thing that I will say with this fella, and again out of his registered interests, he's actually a registered Labour member, which kind of brings his mental capability into question. Right, Professor Jim Hall, a climatard, naturally. Saul Clean, now Clean or Klein, one of the two. Again, it's another one of these. He's well known within the venture capital, so private equity side of things. But again, it's not the sort of person and the type of role that you should have in with such close links to government like this, because you do get essentially the word that I'm trying to start spreading, that it's not crony capitalism, it's crony socialism. This is what I don't like about this kind of thing. Right, Robert Leclerc. Right, now this particular individual turned around and said, when that Neil Ferguson moron, the one with the fake model, and you know, the cuckolder, the guy that gets everything wrong throughout the entirety of his history, he turned around and said that there would be no material difference when that Neil Ferguson had to resign from Sage, despite the fact that he's back in it again, and they tried to sneak that one in very quietly. But if you've got somebody that they've been reliant upon of a bullshit model, and there to be no material difference, so you was going with bullshit regardless. I mean, that kind of statement from somebody is very, very telling. So, right, Dame Ottiline Lisa, whatever. Now, if you remember, if we go back to episode 19, the one that I did as the three-parter, and where I pointed out the issues with the UK Research and Innovation Department, whatever. She's the new CEO. So, not a lot of integrity there then, is there? Alright, Max Liu. Right, this fella, quite a little darling. This is somebody that spent £1,600 of university money on his dog. Why? What the hell would... Anyway, could you imagine doing that anywhere else without being fired? And he's also somebody who, kind of clues in the name, he's very much one of these ones that wants to promote the relationships between universities, and in particular obviously his own university based out in Surrey, and as a priority he wants to have those linked strongly with universities in his homeland in China. So yeah, that sounds like a plan, doesn't it, at the moment? Because yeah, not really working out well. Right, then we get Jim Mcdonald. Now, this one, wow. You know how there's been this theme periodically throughout of how certain people, and in particular when I've done stuff around the United Nations, then there's the relationships around paedophiles and so forth. Well, old Jim Mcdonald here, he should actually go and work for the BBC, because there was something of a scandal at the University of Strathclyde, where one of the professors was a paedophile. And old Jim Mcdonald, what he did was, rather than this being some, what, these are criminal matters, and this arsewipe did a report around the paedophile in his university and basically whitewashed the entire thing. He literally did a BBC and Jimmy Savile job. And in case anybody thinks I'm talking about something in past history like Jimmy Savile and that, like 1970s and whatever, this report was brought out last year. So yeah, this is somebody that you want to have in these kinds of positions, isn't it? This would, I mean, as you can tell, this would all be gone. All be gone. And what the hell is it that with government? I mean, because this is something that's actually been put together and that for Boris. So you can judge somebody by who their mates are. Fucking pedo cover-up whitewash artist. Right. It says a lot for the other people that are be sat next to this twat and all. Right, Davila Mitchell. Oh, right, she's from Arup. Unsurprisingly, I do know that Arup get one hell of a lot of contracts. And this organisation is woke as shit. And it's all this bollocks about women for this and women for that and women for the other. I mean, I did have some sort of connections with some of the, as you'd expect, women at Arup. And I did call them out on a few occasions to turn around that when they were saying that they were going to have a particular gathering to discuss a particular technology in relation to their the design of cities and things of this nature. And I would literally just turn around and say, well, isn't it a bit sexist that you're just having all women turning up? Just saying. Anyway, and with this Davila Mitchell and that, she's also, unsurprisingly, heavily with the World Economic Forum. What would you expect any different? So, then we go into Fiona Murray. Now, Fiona Murray co-authored a paper that said investors prefer entrepreneurial ventures pitched by attractive men. Really? You had to have a study for that? I mean, it's when you're an investor, if you've got somebody that's turned up that looks the part, can talk the part, can give all of the information that you need to understand as an investor, you're going to invest. If somebody turns up looking like a scruffy shit and looks like they hit every branch on the ugly tree on the way down, you can't help it. It's human nature. It's a bit of a distraction, and you just hope that that business plan is fucking good. It's as simple as that. But does it matter as to whether it's a man or a woman? No. If you've got a smartly dressed woman and an attractive woman that comes in and that is also competent, guess what? They'll get the money. I mean, it literally is these sorts of idiots that just want to push a narrative. Absolute load of bollocks. Here's a simple thing. Be good at what you're presenting. You'll do all right. All right, Paul Newman. Not the actor, obviously. I've got a bit of an issue with this fella. Which again, and that, I mean, it's going to stand with quite a few people, in so much as that he is a professor at Oxford University of Oxford. You have to say it the right way around, otherwise it'll apparently be doing all wrong. Bollocks. But he's a professor, and he's also involved with private organisations, private companies, which, I mean, I do understand it to a degree, but still, I mean, when you've got the types of companies that this fella's involved with, it's predominantly around autonomous vehicles and doing these, essentially creating the navigation systems for this, or for autonomous vehicles. Well, I know for a fact that this whole notion of autonomous vehicles and that is bloody years and years away. It literally is. I mean, I'm not going to bother going into all the minutiae of it here, but that essentially means that his so-called private company is dependent on getting taxpayer grants. So if you're from the University of Oxford and you are now apparently in a private company which is going to be getting money because you're from Oxford, University of Oxford, and you've got a company that is dependent on taxpayer money, who do you think is going to get it? Because you're sat on this bloody council. I don't like that. And it literally is crony socialism. So, Venki Ramakrishnan. Yeah. Right. I mean, this. Well, again, over your Ponzi China coronavirus. This is an idiot that thinks everything should be locked down and a virus can be eliminated. So he's a fucking genius, isn't he? No. Brooke Rogers, the behavioural scientist, one of the ones from Sage again. I mean, you should see the list. I mean, when they turn around and say about favouritism, you should have a click on the link that I'll put in the description as to the registered interests, and see how many of these types of positions this propagandist merchant is involved with. But I suppose there are arguments and that about women not getting enough positions and whatever, and that is probably true because this silly bint has got most of them. Absolutely ridiculous. Right, Paul Steen or Stein, I don't know. Now here's where we get Rolls-Royce, because he is the Chief Technology Officer at Rolls-Royce. So again, as much as I know that Rolls-Royce is important to the UK, and when I say Rolls-Royce, I'm not talking about the cars because that's owned by BMW now, I think. I'm talking about like the aircraft engines and the rockets and all that sort of stuff. So it's a big and important company, but this makes it again, it's crony socialism once more, and I don't like it. I do not like it. And he's also one of these ones that gives into an awful lot of this climatard crap. Every time he seems to do a speech, he doesn't seem to be able to hold it back. He has to go into climatard mode. And considering I've already, if you check back in the historical episodes that I've done, I've already proven that that's bullshit. So how can he be an educated person and not know that? But anyway, so last but not least, Lord Stern of Brentford. Now, this is a fella that his name rung a bell with me, and I still haven't figured out what it was exactly. But normally, when I get one of those little alarm bells going in my head, it literally is a case of I know that name, I know that face, and I'm sure he's a retard. It literally is, the retard alert has gone off. And he is an actual perennial fucking retard. He is the epitome of the swamp. I mean, he literally he goes along with every single piece of agenda of the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, like the good little scumbag that he is. He works with Gordon Brown. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, how is it a conservative, or what is plainly obvious, pretend conservatives, have got somebody, I mean, economically speaking, in terms of an economic perspective, Conservative and Labour are supposed to be miles apart. Supposed to be. How the hell would you have somebody that was a part of Gordon Brown's bloody economic team involved with you if you're a proper Conservative? It just shows that it is literally all just one big swamp of these people. And obviously, and that is another one of these ones that goes full on climatard, because, the agenda. More importantly, he's an advisor to the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Who's that? CCP, anyone? So yeah, we've got another commie stooge in your Council for Science and Technology. That sounds like a plan, doesn't it? Because no, they don't steal anything from anybody, do they? This shower of shite would be ended. Simple as that. I would get rid. So this is the sort of thing that's running this kind of process is the reason why it's important that you do get to understand who it is that makes up this swamp. What kind of utter lunacy are the government actually up to that the average member of the public doesn't know about? I mean, if everybody up and down the country knew exactly what was going on, and if they knew that they, in particular, that you've got somebody that will whitewash a pedo report just last year, how many people would turn around and say, oh, I think this lot can do one? It really is worth running this kind of process. So they will be gone. Right, so the last one of the departments that I'll do as part of the recreation of the Hoskyns Wiring Map. Anybody that's not understanding what that means, you're going to have to go back and figure this out. I can't keep repeating what it is that I'm doing. Right, so the FRC, the Financial Reporting Council. Now, the important thing to state with this is that as much as it seems to be a net contributor, the 662k, the issue there is that from the revenue streams, it does include an awful lot of what they term as sanctions. Now, when you're talking about sanctions, I mean, this organisation, by and large, tends to work very closely with the Big Four accounting firms. Now, if you're a Big Four accounting firm, how the hell are you being sanctioned for some of the stuff that you're reporting? Especially when you consider that, I mean, we all know the relationships between the big accounting firms and the big law firms and whatever, and that, and then HMRC and, you know, the legal departments and all this sort of stuff. We know that they basically write the rules themselves, so they know how to get around them. So it's, I don't know, this strikes me as one of these ones that I'm not entirely sure that this, I know that regulation around this type of thing, around auditing and making sure that everybody's doing the stuff that they should be doing, but I'm not entirely sure that this as a standalone independent organisation is the solution. When I come later on to do the HMRC, I'll be looking at that area and that to see if it should actually be something that is undertaken through that department. So this is something that's going to go into the RASIC, and that in terms of review and reform, because I'd want to have a good look at this one. Then obviously in that, when it comes down to the, I've got the highlighted red boxes there, and if you consider what it is that they're supposed to be about at the moment, so I've got the part from the website and that says what they are actually supposed to be about, what it is that they're actually supposed to do, and then you look at this stuff in the boxes and the impact of climate change and the priorities, supporting this green finance strategy. Oh, get the fuck out of town, seriously. This has got nothing to do with what they're supposed to be about. So if we did nothing else, get rid of the ideological bullshit, get rid of the lefty crap, the socialist idiocy, get rid of it. So again, that sort of stuff, and that is about making sure that you do a review and reform, and that to get rid of all of that sort of nonsense and any moron that's in these departments that's pushing it. But the other part to this, realistically, as well, and that is if you are going to have an organisation that is supposed to be ensuring that there's transparency and all the rest of this sort of stuff, then how come you can't do the same for the government departments? Because as I've demonstrated, and that already, and again I'll put some more evidence of this up in a moment, and that to show the stage that we're at with business, energy and industrial strategy. If they're not reporting their numbers correctly, how come you've got these various different little bodies that claim to be checking that everybody's doing things correctly, and yet they'll just let this bullshit fly? So there's issues of competency around this sort of stuff, and that, which, like I say, is it an overstep of the mark of what government is supposed to be doing as well? So there's various areas of this. Now, like I said, I think this is something that will come into more detail, and that we'll do HMRC, because it smacks me as wrong. It smacks to me as being wrong. And I'm also not 100% sure that all of the money that they get from revenue is not not one of these areas where they're actually getting money from the taxpayer. Especially when you consider that I did the breakdown from the operating expenses, and on average, the people that are working in these departments and that are getting over 100 grand each. So, you know, there's certainly questions to be raised in the RASIC stage. So, because of that 662,000, it does mean that the department's total amount of money, which again I know you can't read it. I'll show it to you once I get to the end of this particular department. But those are the figures, and it does mean that the overall figure has gone down by that 662,000. But it doesn't matter, because, like I say, we're still 7.73 billion over reported numbers, so not good. And then in terms of the policy developments, just got in there to abolish the Commission for Shale Gas and abolish the Council for Science and Technology, then review and reform the what was it that I just did? Financial Reporting Council. So that is the stage that I'll go to this week in terms of those 3 offices. So we're getting closer towards the end of having finished the 3rd cabinet office. And so there's a fair way to go, but then, you know, nothing gets done immediately. You have to be able to take your time and understand these things. And as you know, if I was sat here with a great team of people, yeah, I'd be able to push a whole load of stuff and that, but I'm doing this on my own, so bear with. Which then takes me into, now, whether I'm going to do a little, I don't know, some sort of little bit of a music piece to go along with this, who knows, who cares. But this is going to be my little opening slide, and that to say that right now we're going into the solutions part of things. Now, obviously, when I'm doing my solutions part of things, and that it's going to depend on how long I've already spent talking about the core focus, which is the Sisyphus complex solution. So I won't be going too far today, just a couple of little bits and pieces, and that there's stuff that we need to just get your head around to begin with. And this is where we have got the title of this week's episode of Take Up the Baton, because as much as the election farce out in America has obviously just resulted in the swamp doing what the swamp always does, which is just basically steal, lie, cheat. That plus a whole bunch of the other agenda bullshit that has taken place over the last year and really shown itself. And then obviously that moving into this year as well, and that with all the crap that has happened over the social media and what have you. And anybody that's out in the States, don't think that it's just you guys that are getting hit with it. There's a whole bunch of people over here that have been hit with this censorship as well, because it is a world problem. It literally struck me about a week or so ago. I mean, everybody goes through periods where you're sort of thinking, well, there's so much going on and that, and there's so much bad news coming out and that, I'm going to be down about this and down about that. And you can get into a mindset of just thinking, oh, this is just too bloody much. But it particularly struck me about a week or so ago in that, where I just thought, I'm actually feeling pretty good about everything that's taken place. And I'm feeling pretty good about things that have taken place, because you can't really do something if you don't know what the problem is and who the problem is coming from. But I think all of the real scumbags have certainly shown their face. And when the scumbags have shown their face, that means that you can actually start to figure out what the hell it is that you need to do to sort that out. And that's why I wanted to do the solutions part of things. So, you're not going to like my first part. That is a very good indication of the key problem that has led up to all of those people being able to do all of the things that they're doing to date. The white feather is, I should have written down the history of this, because I understand that there's a couple of different versions of this, but I don't really care. I want to go with the basic understanding of this. The white feather is a symbol of cowardice. And I think people have got to have some real willful ignorance not to understand that an awful lot of the bullshit that is being rammed down people's throats these days is all based because of, culturally, the Western nations have become nations full of cowards that won't say anything, that won't go against the grain, that won't let all of these ideological retards keep shouting their bullshit without turning around saying, would you shut the fuck up? I can actually be a bit bolshy insofar as this is concerned, and it's not because I'm in some sort of highfalutin position where, you know, I'm the master of a massive castle or anything like that. I mean, you'd be surprised how little I get by on, or probably not. But there has never been a single point in my life where I have ever allowed anybody to just push complete and utter bollocks without saying so. I don't have that within me. I can't keep my mouth shut over these things. That's not to say that literally everything that I've ever done in my life has been absolutely 100% perfect. I am the epitome, the prime example of how you're supposed to live your life. No, I'm not. Far from it. But I'm not a fucking coward. That is the one thing that I will hold on to. I've never been a coward. And that's why I recognise that as being a particular problem. People need to recognise that, and they need to internally do something about it yourself. Whether it's at your organisation where you work, in the business that you're doing yourself, whether you are being allowed to be pushed around, whether it be to do with looking after your own kids and the kids running the house rather than you, a whole range of different things. You need to grow some balls. And I don't care if you're a man or a woman, because apparently, according to these twats, that doesn't matter either, and that because you're all interchangeable depending on what day of the fucking week it is. Grow some balls. That's part one. So, part of growing some balls and understanding what it is that you're actually supposed to be doing, you have to start off with some basic principles. So, racked my brain a little bit and thought, okay, so what are the real principles here? And I can only realistically boil it down, because I mean, I hate it when they do this crap of, oh, it's got to be a certain set number of words and that, and it all has to come up with this nice little acronym to come up with a silly little fucking name. Don't care. What are the actual bloody things that you can boil this down to? And I feel free to chuck out anything if you think that there's anything that needs to be adjusted here, but honesty, responsibility, morality are the prime ones. I've put bravery in there because I've just told you need to grow some balls, and it's not in there as a green colour and that because of some climate art crap. It's green because it's the fucking Hulk. You need to be able to know when to go green and go, no, fuck off, I've had enough of this. Get your basics. I know that out in the States that there's been an awful lot of people that have turned around and trying to come up with something a little bit similar to this, and they will always put faith in there. Now, obviously I'm not religious, so that's not something that I would push. If you are of that persuasion, if that works for you, that's fine. But I've yet to see anyone suggest faith as being an actual solution to anything that is meaningful. And the reason why is there's two parts to this. The first one is that when you look at the heads of any religion and that, but let's face it, and that, I mean, if we're Western nations, we're Christian nations. It's simple as that. I'm not really interested in people turning around and telling us we're multi-faith and all that. No, we're not. At our heart, we're Christian nations. So that brings you down to your basics of your Church of England and your Catholics. I know you've got other denominations and that, but I'm not bothering with all of that. at the heads of both of those churches, you have got absolute scumbags and a history of scumbags. The exact same shit that I pointed out before about that twat that was sat on that council covering over for paedophiles. What the hell do you think they've been doing in the church? Have a look at Ireland, that was seriously run by the church, and see the bodies buried there. If you're gonna have something that is based on faith, have it based on what it means to you personally. Don't have it associated with the heads of your particular denomination, because they're certainly not anything to look up to. The second part to that is when it comes down to actual solutions that can be based from faith. There's a joke which I'm about to destroy because I don't remember the full joke itself, but it gives a very good indication as to where you can run into a serious problem if you just go with faith alone. You might know the joke, so you know, basically there's a fella sat on a roof of his house because there's been a flood, and the waters are rising and rising and rising, and it's getting close to covering the house. And a guy comes along in a boat and says, "Jump in, mate, and I'll take you to safety." And the fella sits on the roof and he says, no, it's okay, I have faith, God will save me." The guy in the boat just sort of goes, "Okay, all right," goes off and goes to save somebody else. Helicopter comes overhead. They throw down a ladder. The fella shouts from the helicopter, "Grab the ladder, we'll take you to safety." The guy sitting on the roof, as the water's coming closer and closer to him, and he goes, no, I'm okay, I have faith, God will save me." The fella from the helicopter looks down and says, "Oh, fuck this, you know, we've got other people to rescue as well," so off they go. Well, needless to say, the guy sits there, the water comes up, and he drowns and he dies. Turns up to the pearly gates, and he goes to St. Peter, and he says, "Well, am I dead?" I was going, yeah. He says, will I be seeing God now?" And God comes out through the gates, and he goes, "You that fellow that was sat on the roof and just got drowned?" And he goes, "Yes, that was me, God. I have such faith in you. I was waiting for you to come and save me. I was waiting for a sign for you to come and save me." And he said, "You was waiting for a sign for me to come and save you?" He says, "I sent you a guy in a boat, I sent you a helicopter. What the fuck is wrong with you?" Faith alone has human solutions. So, just for those people that wanted to include faith, I thought I'd tell that. Now, I'm sure that might piss off an awful lot of people. Don't really care. Honesty. You have to be honest about things. So, when it comes down to honesty, in particular, is there such a thing as remaining honest whilst not necessarily telling the truth? Yeah, there is. There is. You know, I wouldn't go so far as to say a little white lie, but just holding back on the truth a bit. And the reason why you'd hold back on the truth on certain occasions is if you're coming across somebody that does not have your best intentions at heart. Those people don't need to know what you're doing. They don't need to know what you're thinking. They don't need to know anything. Those are the people that you politely smile to and go, yeah. And in your head you're going, "On your fucking bike, mate." And you get on with what you're doing. There's not much point. If you've got somebody that is a dishonourable person, somebody that is intent on being a liar, they're taking the 30 pieces of silver and so forth, it's up to them to understand that they're wrong. You can occasionally point out where they're wrong, but especially in the current climate, there's an awful lot of these people that are just completely off their fucking heads, literally in a cult, and you're wasting your time. Just go with the people that you know and that you can trust. That's going to become an important part of this. Obviously, the responsibility part of things, I've generally put that one in there, much more to do with the how you look after your kids. Because as much as an awful lot of people are turning around, and I think I said this last week as well, but when people are turning around and saying, oh, well, the kids and that, they're being indoctrinated into this and blah, blah, blah. They're your bloody kids. It's your responsibility to make sure that they do understand the truth. And that they do grow up to be honest and all the rest of it. I mean, I'm actually quite pleased that there are large groups of kids that are quite plainly revolting against this kind of nonsense. And you will find that the ones that are revolting against this nonsense are much more stable in the head, obviously. But it's your responsibility to do that. Never forget your own responsibility. And always remember that when we're turning, and I saw it again earlier today, and that on, I think it was a programme called the New Culture Forum, where they turned around and said it about the youngsters and that, and they don't seem to want to rebel against a lot of the woke shit and what have you. And you think, well, who is it that's actually teaching the woke shit in the first place? When you look at the United Nations, when you look at the World Economic Forum, the people that are at the head of that, these are not whippersnappers, are they? Old Adolf Schwab isn't exactly 17 years old. It's the elders that are the ones that are pushing the crap in the first place. So it's the elders' responsibility to be the adults. Then you'll have a chance of the kids actually being decent, respectable kids as they grow older. It's your responsibility. If you don't take up that responsibility, go back to the last page and take your white feather. The morality side of things. God, that would end up being this one will end up being a bit of a minefield, but seriously, in that, I mean, there's a range of different things around this and that ends up in a wider discussion that we can go into on a different time. But there's the sort of levels of depravity that people just seem to let go these days. And then you wonder why you got so many of these fucking paedophiles that are allowed to get away with being paedophiles. That kind of thing, I can't get my head around that at all. How anybody finds these things acceptable is just beyond me. But it's up to you as an individual, and that, you know, you've got to get your morality lever, whatever the fuck you want to call it. You've got to get that level right. Because again, when you start becoming more and more accepting of depravity, then don't be surprised when shit starts to fall down. So all of these sorts of things, they lead to you having the confidence to be able to have that bravery to where you can turn around and say, right, I'm not putting up with this. You know, I'm not going to suddenly go down this identity politics route that, despite they're all shouting to turn around and say, well, you know, if you don't go down the identity politics route and that you're a racist, but you can look back at them and go, you're the ones that are dividing people by colour, you racist bastard. Don't go down these roads. Don't allow it. Open your mouth. Do it sensibly. But do it. But think about your principles. And if you have to, make a note of your own principles, whatever it is that you need to do, to be able to just say, right, this is my guiding line. Don't do anything, some great silly long list. You know, this isn't a bloody greetings card. Just something basic. that you can keep in your head and you can go, right, yeah, I know that. In any given situation, I've got me 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, that's all I need to rely on. Keep it simple, because other things are going to get much more complicated. So I will go into the one basic area in that I think is going to be a start point in terms of the way that an awful lot of people work at the moment, especially with all this social media crap. You've got to start thinking about how you actually develop your network, so that you can understand who you can speak to, who you can trust, how you can actually do things together. And this sort of thing and that will work out a little bit later on as to why this becomes important, because when I move forward into making suggestions around how we actually start enacting some proper political change and changing your nation for the better, it's going to depend an awful lot on the legwork that you've done to be able to achieve it. Because we have to understand that there is not a single established party, not one, and I don't care what country you're in. They don't care about the people. It's as simple as that. And if you're going to go out at any point in that and go, oh yeah, I'm going to vote for Conservative, Labour, Lib Dems, bloody Democrats, Republicans, whatever, you're wasting your time. It's all the same shit. So you need to be looking towards what are the steps that you need to take to be able to look towards developing an alternative way. And when I'm talking about an alternative way, I'm not talking about going into another fucked up ideology of libertarianism, or God, there was another one that I've heard fairly recently, and that of somebody else that started to do solutions. Agrarianism. I mean, yeah, hippies basically. Let's get you started first. An awful lot of people, like I say, they're very heavily dependent on this social media and what have you, and it is an unhealthy obsession to begin with. Am I on social media? Yes, I am. Obviously, I'm making this bloody video, which is going onto social media. Does my life depend on this? No. Have I been thrown off of social media before? Yes. Did I care? No. Not one jot. But I didn't follow, in certain circumstances, I didn't follow a little bit of advice that normally I do stick by, because I am somebody that I keep databases on a whole range of different things. And I don't do it for selling information. I don't do it because I want to cause any sort of disruption or anything like that. I do it because I need to have the knowledge. And I need to know who I can work with, who I can trust, what sectors I can work with, all this type of stuff. But what you need to be looking towards doing for the time being, and now you can do this on a business basis, you can do this on a personal basis, but whatever you do, stop leaving all of your information on a social network. Don't turn around and go, okay, right, now I've got 20,000 followers. So what? Seriously, so what? How many of those people do you see making comments and where you think that actually seems like a reasonable person? That's somebody that I could actually talk to. This is not just some random person that occasionally puts a like up against something that you've done. I mean, really, who cares? Who are the people that within your immediate, your known networks, people that you in your family, people, your family friends and so forth? You know, years gone by and that you used to have a diary that wasn't a diary where you're putting down, you know, your daily thoughts, but a diary that was literally name, address, telephone number, so forth. Make those databases. When you come across somebody that is worthwhile, put their name into a spreadsheet of some sort. Put their contact details in there. So, I mean, if you did end up getting kicked off of a social network, you can still get in contact with that person. Being able to keep in touch with people by email is actually, it's as good as any social media nonsense. because you can put your CC and your BCC, you can send it out to a bunch of people and go, this is what I think at the moment. I mean, don't start chucking out a load of garbage that's going to end up annoying people. You know, use it for something that is actually worthwhile, where you, like I say, you can develop your network. And as I'm going forward and giving little bits of advice around how we can actually take things forward, you'll understand why this becomes important later on. But start putting down that information, have it offline, so you've got access to it irrespective. You don't have to rely on Twitter and Fartbook and any of the other ones. You've got the people that you know that you can trust. Start putting that information in there so that if you want to have a conversation offline, you can have a conversation offline. If anything does happen, I mean, it goes down. It doesn't necessarily have to be to do with you being kicked off. You might want to actually say something that you know damn well you're not going to be able to put up online, but you still know that those people can have that conversation with you. Use your email. That's what it's there for. If you're worried about having an email address that's also going to be compromised, I've not that long ago, and I set up. There was a fella called God, what was his name? Barry, I think his name is. He'd actually advised this to me a while ago, and I've set one up now as a Proton mail because it's private. There's none of this shit with Google and all that sort of stuff, and that it's all very, very private, and it's kept out in Switzerland. So set it up so that you've got, you know, you can have a number of different sheets. You can say, right, okay, here's a sheet, family and friends. Here's a sheet, online network. Here's a sheet, my business network. Here's a sheet, my international network. So on and so forth. Build them out of the people that you know and trust. It can have ludicrously practical benefits as well. I mean, we're all familiar with, I would imagine, how you get somebody that'll turn around and suddenly sort of put up online or send you an email that says, I need a plumber. Has anybody got any idea of a decent plumber that they can recommend in the area? You might turn around and go, okay, yeah, I had some work done by, down my list, there he is, here's his number. Very easy, practical. It's advice, you're helping each other out. You know, it doesn't have to have, we're all getting together now to take over the world. It doesn't have to have that kind of highfalutin idea behind it. It can just literally be, right, somebody needs to be recommended. Here you go. Here's the information. And it once you've got started and put it in a format that suits you, so that you understand it. You know, doesn't have to be a set way of doing this. But once you've set up this stuff, it then becomes very easy. In so much as, like, you might come across a contact once a week, something like that, and you think, okay, right, I'll stick that in, I'll stick that person in there, and it's a couple of moments and you're done. Okay, so start to have your offline network written down in some form of a database. However you do that is entirely up to you. I always, obviously, I tend to do things as I've put up as the example there, and I'll put things in an Excel data sheet. And I've got, like I said, I've got stacks of them. But it's a simple thing that you can do that helps you to start get going. And like I say, as we're moving forward into solutions, you'll come to understand why this becomes very, very, very useful a little bit later. But we'll move into all this sort of stuff bit by bit. I did want to touch on an immediate solution because of these problems of the likes of this Amazon Web Services shutting down Parler. This doesn't have to be for anybody that's putting together their own social media site. This can just be for companies that are, because obviously this is not something that is for your average individual, put it that way. This is for people that want to do their own, I forget what the term is now, alternative media. people like that, companies that don't like the direction that the likes of Amazon Web Services are doing, where they seem to be thinking that they're a big monopoly that can just shut people down whenever they feel like it. If there are companies out there and that have got some actual ethics, some morals, and some responsibility, if you don't know where you can actually find an alternative solution, I can help. And this is not me turning around and saying I can help, and by the way, it's going to cost you XYZ. This is something that I'm prepared to do. There's the email address that you can get in touch with me. I will give you the advice. I've got 3 separate locations, geographical locations, a few different alternatives within those 3 geographic locations. I can give you alternatives that you don't have any of the problems that you're going to get with the likes of the ideologues at Amazon. The services are, it's servers. It doesn't matter. Frankly, it doesn't matter where they're located. I mean, one of the locations is that is actually just coming online fairly soon. Because it's a server, frankly, the location doesn't matter that much. It will all be down to whether the cost works out for you or not. But I'm not going to be making these introductions on the basis of I'm not going to introduce unless you pay me X and Y and Z. I'm doing this because I want people to have those alternatives. Simple as that. This is not my core business. Well, part of one of them is, but I'm not going to be taking any fees for any of this. I will make I'll do a little bit of due diligence on you, because I'm not going to be introducing a bunch of bloody extremist arseholes, no climatards, no lunatics of any description. So I will do a bit of due diligence to make sure that you are legit. But then I'm more than happy to introduce you to these places, and then I'll even give you some assistance to find out, are the costs right for you? And then you take it away for yourself. You deal with it yourself. You'll have the relationship with the people that I introduce you to. They will have the solution for you. I don't need to benefit from this. This is something that I will do based out of a moral duty to make sure that the likes of Amazon don't get to dictate to people. So again, it's that scenario of putting your money where your mouth is. I don't need to profit from this. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. Right, this last little bit, this isn't part of the solutions now. This is something that I'm just going to give a little bit of an indication to, because if you'd remembered, there was a bit of a conversation that I'd had in terms of how you actually ask questions for freedom of information and all this sort of stuff, and being able to put people on the spot a little bit. Christina had sent me a question in the comments last week. Was it last week or the week before? I can't remember exactly. Maybe a couple of weeks ago. I asked the question. I did adjust it a little bit to be able to lull them into a bit of a false sense of security. I got the answer, and the answer I got, and this is to do with having isolated this China coronavirus. This answer that I got is outrageous. And this is just a bit of an indication that I'm going to have to do a standalone video for this one in particular. It does kind of feed in with the solutions, because this is the sort of stuff that you can start to learn how to do, to start holding these people to account, and you can start getting some actual truth out there, because they can't turn around and tell you that you're telling a lie when the truth has come directly from the horse's mouth. But like I say, I'll do a standalone video for that one. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of advance notice of that. If you remember, I did the stuff about the climatard stuff, where I presented the evidence that these people have got no burden of proof whatsoever. None at all. Very similar type of scenario. So, that will do it for this week. Like I say, the solutions side of things, I do have things worked out so that I can do a kind of like a more step-by-step bit of guidance. Some of it is going to be for you on a day-to-day practical basis. Some of it is going to be more big picture, a bit like the servers and so forth. And you just use whatever is relevant to you. You know, this is, once again, this is not turning around and dictating how your life should be. It's not a Paulism thing. You do what works for you. So, obviously, finishing up here and that with my own little company promotion. Oh, one other thing before I go. Obviously, I always end with the Moirai directory. And the Moirai directory is giving a bit of a shout out to companies. No paid promotions at all. It's giving a bit of shout out to small companies that are not going to be following any other idiot agendas or anything like that. They're just doing their thing competently and the best way that they can without falling into this trap of going into the lunatic brigades. None of the identity politics and all that sort of crap. If anybody wants to have a bit of a shout out, more than happy for you to get in touch. I'll have a look, providing that you're not going to be one of these ones that will stick a Black Lives Matter flag or something like that on your website. I'm quite happy to have a chat and give you a bit of a shout out. And on that basis, you may have noticed, and that the beer that I'm drinking tonight, I did give a little bit of a shout out late last night to a local organisation that will have been going through quite a lot of crap based on all of the shutdowns, because it's a brewery very much dependent on the pubs being open, which they're not. And it's a local brewery called Gads. This particular beer is called Black Pearl. Absolutely lovely. It's an oyster stout. Gorgeous stuff. I made my order at 2:30 this morning. By the time I got up and got downstairs and that, by 9 o'clock, something like that, I had a box of 24 of these on my doorstep waiting for me. Good company. And I know they're a good company as well, because there's an acquaintance of mine out in Japan that imports and sells them in Japan. So they go onto their webpage and that they can deliver internationally as well. Excellent beer. But this is one of the other things that people can do. Rather than everybody having to be dependent on going to your nearest big name superstore and that, where basically they're getting all of the money now and destroying all the local businesses. Promote your local business. Get in touch with them and say, is there anything that you can do? If you're being shut down, is there anything that you can do, and that's be able to deliver stuff, or we can come and somehow pick it up, or anything like that. Do something to be able to help your smaller businesses, because you're going to need them. You're going to need them. I mean, this absolute lunatic socialist ideology that seems to think that all these big companies that are members of the World Economic Forum and that are going to be the ones that inherit the earth. I mean, it's just retarded. These people are so thick. So stop, don't buy from them. Don't buy from the people that are actually pushing the kind of agenda that is literally going to see nations be harmed to such an incredible extent that we are talking about life and death with a number of people. They will put people into extreme poverty. The number of jobs being lost because of this China coronavirus at the moment is absolutely idiotic. Oh, and I've seen an article on that where this moron Boris, the absolute bloody plain as day socialist, is once again coming out with all of this climatard crap, and it produces hundreds of thousands of jobs. No, it doesn't. No, it bloody doesn't. The Prospect Union in the UK, they're the union for the guys that work within the energy sector, and they have complained to say that because of this push for renewables, the jobs in that particular sector have dropped by 1/3. When you've got something that is based on a lie in the first place, when you've got people that are trying to develop a false economy, it only leads one way. Bloody disaster. If something is true, you can see results from it and you can evidence it. You can see it on your bottom line. When something is a lie, and then it's an observable lie, it's bullshit to be avoided. And these absolute morons don't seem to get it through their heads. So it's up to each individual to make sure that the companies that we are going to be reliant on, the ones that do actually make up the vast majority of the jobs for people, especially if you need some work in your local area, if you can't travel too far for it, you need to be giving them the support that they need. Okay? So give a shout out to your local business. Give them a helping hand. Do whatever you can. And don't do it on the basis of, oh, well, I'll give you a shout out if you pay me this and if you pay me that. No. This is about, again, this is, and one of the part of this is about morals. Understanding the bigger picture. Yes, if those small businesses and that, then are they going to be making a profit? Yes. That's how they stay alive. That's how they then create jobs. If you've got a job of your own, or if you've got an income that's being able to allow you to survive, if they're providing a service or a product or anything like that that you would purchase anyway, just help them out. Because you never know, a bit later on, you might need to be able to knock on their door and say, I've promoted the hell out of your business. I'm in a bit of a situation at the moment. Have you got any spare work? And they might turn around. You know, this never ever works out perfectly, by the way, but just the basic principle of it. If you've shown that kindness to a bunch of other people, they'll remember. They will remember. And you will get it back. In your hour of need, they might be there for you. So, think about it. That's what I want to do with the servers. I don't need to make money off of that. I do it out of principle. And if more people have got that kind of principle, then we'll certainly get through whatever crap these idiots want to throw at us. All right? So, right, I've now got to make the intro to this because I haven't prepared that yet. Okay, so all the best. Any suggestions for solutions that you've got or anything like that, any other comments that you want to make, feel free. You know, it's like I say, this is not all about me dictating what everybody has to do. You contribute yourself. You know, the more minds that come together, the better off we'll all be. Okay, and not in a socialist way. Have to keep repeating that. No socialism, none of that crap. All right, have a good weekend. See you later. Bye bye.